Welcome to another segment of the Gay Bar Archives show, where we explore gay history one bar at a time. I'm your host, Art Smith, and today we're back with DJ Paul V. You've already heard his stories about the exciting times in Boston and his great experiences at Club Man Ray and Spit and all kinds of other clubs in the city of Boston. But now we're going to talk about how his life changed after he moved to Los Angeles. So, welcome, Paul.
Thanks for having me back. I'm excited to do the second part of this.
Me too. And I can't wait to hear what it was like for a DJ drag queen from Boston to suddenly be working for Warner Brothers promoting alternative radio in LA. So, what was that like?
Well, it was, moving was a culture shock. I'd visited here in like 81, 82. A friend of mine lived like in West Covina, which is way out of LA, but I thought it was LA. So I felt like lost. And, it's huge here. Boston's like a nice little compact city. LA is huge, and it's all driving and it's all freeways. And, the other thing is also, as far as DJing, I went from being a slightly big fish in a small pond to basically a goldfish in the Pacific Ocean. Like, no one knew who I was coming here. But in terms of Warner Brothers, that was pretty amazing because they had just the most incredible music. The band that I really latched onto, and like literally 2 weeks after I started my job, their record came out. Jane's Addiction was the band. The album is called Nothing Shocking. And oh my God, I loved them. Perry Farrell was the leader of the band. And I just remember like thinking, they're giving me a paycheck to talk about how much I love this record. All right, I'm cool with that. But it wasn't just Jane's Addiction. There was Depeche Mode, The Pretenders, Echo and the Bunnymen, New Order, the Ramones. First of all of Sire Records. So you think of the incredible roster of Sire. So it made it easy in the sense that we put out records that radio kind of wanted to play. It wasn't a stretch to try to get somebody to play, Lips Like Sugar by Echo and the Bunnymen, or, True Faith by New Order. College radio was a little different because college radio was way more like, oh, we don't play that, it was too pop. And I remember with Jane's Addiction, they said, oh, we don't play metal. I mean, Jane's Addiction is a rock band kind of in the vein of like Led Zeppelin meets anyway, that's not even a good description, but they were a rock band. And music thought of as rock and roll. College radio wouldn't play it. It wasn't edgy or weird enough for them to play it. But a lot of the other stuff that we had was. So I eventually started to do commercial radio. So like in LA, the big flagship alternative station is K-Rock. I mean, K-Rock is a world famous radio station. And at that time, alternative music was still kind of this weird genre that nobody knew about or talked about. It certainly wasn't really selling records, but it was starting to kind of, bubble up. And there was about 30 K-Rocks across the country. In Boston, there was WFNX. In Seattle, a station called The End. DC had a great station. Dallas did. So that's when I started to try to get the records played where they would really get heard, on commercial radio, FM radio. But that was only playing all this great music at the time. So it was great. And I got to travel. I got to see, the bands I loved, see them play live. I saw Jane's Addiction literally 35 times before I left the label. That's how much I love them. And we'd go see them whenever I could. And, in that world, there weren't many gay guys or women doing what I did at the other labels. It was mostly a straight guy kind of game. but I never felt, shunned or not accepted. But a lot of the guys that ran the radio stations, they were also straight. And kind of how this works is the schmooze, like if you establish a relationship with the radio station, you take the guy out to have a drink, or the big thing at that time was like you would if you were in a city, like if you go to Denver and the guy from the radio station in Denver, you go to a Denver strip club. Well, I'm not going to go to a strip club, okay? So I felt a little kind of like an outsider on that level, but otherwise I didn't feel, I felt like, and plus, like, again, I had some of the best records. Like a lot of the other labels were jealous because we just put out amazing records. Lou Reed, Red Hot Chili Peppers, REM. I keep forgetting, like the list just goes on. We had so many incredible bands. So I did that for 5 years. And getting back to this whole schmoozing thing, what happened towards the end of it was that it went from the music really motivating the radio station to play a song to how can you grease my palm? Like what will you get? Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, it was never money, but you would like say, oh, okay, if you put this record in heavy rotation, we'll pay for like 2 of your listeners to fly to Cancun and meet, X band or whatever. Or here's like 100 free CDs to give out. Go drive your van to the beach and here's 100 free CDs. So it kind of became that. And I don't know. I didn't want to play that game. Like, I know that sounds like a little high and mighty, but I felt like what brought me there and why I loved being there was shifting away from how much I loved the music to can I be a good schmoozer? So, and I wanted to maybe get into marketing. I thought, well, I just don't want to be on the phone or doing this. I don't want to be doing promotion. Can I do like marketing or, a more behind the scenes thing? And the problem with Warner Brothers Records is that if you got hired at Warner Brothers, you were a lifer. Like, it was so great to work there. Nobody left. So, I mean, I was working with people that started in like 1972 or whatever. And my boss kind of said, there's really no place for you to move here. We can't make up a position for you. So I quit. And part of the reason why I quit was that after Jane's Addiction broke up, at that time, Perry Farrell had already created Lollapalooza, which I was sort of involved with because Jane's was the headliner for the first one. And he formed a band called Porno for Pyros. And they put an album out and they were going to work on their second album. And they wanted to they didn't like their manager. They wanted to fire their manager. And they wanted to have me and another guy, Roger Leonard, be kind of co-managers. So I said to Perry, I go, well, because managers only work on commission. So if the band's not really touring or, making royalties or stuff, the manager's really not going to get paid. But I said to Perry, if you can kind of put me on a payroll fairly close to what I was making at the label, I'll do it. And he agreed to it. So I walked away at the time, we're talking about 1994. I walked away, I was making $80,000 a year with an expense account. And I look back at it now and I'm like, what the hell was I thinking? But what I was thinking was, I had to feel, I don't know. And again, this might sound high and mighty, but I didn't want to promote music. I wanted to feel good about being involved with music on a more pure level. I just did. I didn't want to be a cog in the machine, and I wanted to work more closely with how a record got created, working with a band who were going to be working on a record. So it was really perfect. It was a great situation to be involved with. The problem was they were all really on drugs bad. Heroin, cocaine, crack. It was a nightmare. It took 2 years to make their second record, and then the record ended up bombing. So, yikes. That wasn't exactly the great outcome that I wanted, but I wanted to try it. But then also at that time, I wanted to try to manage a band my own. I wanted to have a band that I could have under my wing and really be the main guy. So I went to see this band, this local LA band called Extra Fancy. And they were playing at a Tom of Finland beer bust on a Sunday at this sort of art space. And I walked in, and the lead singer is wearing nothing but a jockstrap. And he has a 50-gallon metal drum, right? That he is adding percussion to with metal sticks, playing on this drum, standing on the drum. And the band was really great. They were kind of like a rockabilly alternative. It's hard to describe them because they really had their own sound. And then with this industrial thing, it was really unique. And Brian Grillo, the singer, was gay. And I went up to him after. I said, I don't know if you guys have a manager. I'm kind of new at this, but I'd love to work with you. So they hired me. And we went on they got signed by a little indie label, and they made a record. We were going to put out a 7-inch single, and I'll have to get you the artwork. I sent part of it to you, but it's censored. But they were going to put out a 7-inch for this record called You Look Like a Movie Star, Honey, which is kind of their big hit in their sets. And I had a gay magazine from like 1978 that had this artwork, this certain artist, I think his name was Joe Smith. And it was John Travolta from his iconic arm in the air pose with the suit. But he was completely naked, right? With this giant cock. And it looked real. Like it was a style that looked really almost like it was real, but it wasn't. You knew it was art. But I was like, Brian, do you want to like get noticed and kind of shock the record stores and record buyers by do you want to make a statement? Like, do you want to do this? And he agreed to it. And now you have to remember the other 3 guys in the band are straight, but of course they're totally down with supporting Brian. So we put it out. And of course, first of all, the record stores were like, well, we're going to have to put a sticker over John Travolta's big cock. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Well, it got written up like in all the trade magazines, like this, have you seen the single? There's like this nudity, gay nudity. So John Travolta finds out about it. And he's like, he wants to sue us. Okay. We're like, we printed 1,000 of these things and sold them at the smallest record stores. And I'm like, what are they going to sue us for? Brian's, 68 Buick and a barbecue in the back. But the fact that he was threatening to sue us, like it was cease and desist. Okay. So the fact that he was threatening to sue us got us all this huge press. So I was like, okay, I'll do marketing my own way. And maybe it was a mistake, like maybe it wasn't the right thing to do, but you know what they say, any publicity is good publicity. And if you can work it to your advantage, and I also felt like, let's fuck up the system. Like you see tons of records with tits and pussy. Nobody will put out a dick and then kind of also use like an iconic Hollywood icon. Who, by the way, I think we know it's a kind of open secret that John Travolta. And the song was called "You Look Like a Movie Star, Honey," and he thought that we drew the art ourselves. I don't think he realized that we actually lifted it, and that was another thing. Like we stole this art. I mean, we tweaked it a little bit, but we stole this artwork out of a gay magazine, a gay porn magazine. Anyway, so do you want me to tell the story? Because it's kind of a story. It has nothing to do with clubs, but it does have to do kind of with gay history and Atlantic Records. and what they did to the band.
Go for it.
Okay. So nobody would sign this band. And the thing is, live, they were absolutely incredible. No band wanted to play after them because you couldn't. They just were so visceral and just like a ball of sweat when they were done. No band could match it. And I'm not bragging yet. It's just they were just so good. So Atlantic Records started to show an interest because they wanted to start a gay music division, and they were going to put out like a Pet Shop Boys track or album. And there was one other band, I think. Oh, Jill Sobule, remember her? And even though like they were not a gay band, and again, it's only one guy who's gay. We had no other choice. Like nobody else wanted to sign the band, and they were only going to we were going to re-record a few of the songs, change up the album, and sort of re-release it. So they sign us for not a lot of money. They re-release the record. We go and make a music video. They do a cover of Nina Simone's. Well, it's not even Nina Simone's. I mean, it's Sinner Man. Oh, Sinner Man, where are you going to run to? And they do it kind of in this punk rockabilly style. It's a great, great song. And we go to make a video, and a guy named John Reese directed it, who he directed this infamous video by Nine Inch Nails that got banned, and I forget Happiness and Slavery, I think it was called. And what the basic story is, Brian's walking down the street, and there's a preacher on a soapbox with a Bible who's like, trying to like get people to listen to him. And Brian walks by, and the preacher does like a double take, like, oh, he's hot. Well, the preacher was played by Alexis Arquette. Before Alexis Arquette transitioned, Alexis Arquette was a guy, a male, who did drag, but he, at that time in 1996, he was a guy. And so it's, it's a very kind of normal music video, but then there's a scene where like Brian walks into this laundromat and walks over to this other kind of like punk rock looking guy and kisses him right on the lips, and they walk out together. And then there's a scene like a cruising scene, like there's a kind of gay guy standing at night against a, chain link fence and stuff like that. And the preacher comes up and cruises Brian, and they end up going back to whatever, and the end of the video is them shirtless, kissing, not punching each other, but like kind of love taps, right? Part of Brian's butt is showing, not his butt, but like his pants are down a little bit. And then the preacher runs away ashamed, ashamed of what he did, because he can't be his true self, and he just had sex with a guy. And again, this is 1996. And I remember we went and showed the marketing team this video, and you could hear, when it was over, the silence in that room, you could hear, a piece of dust fall on the floor. And suffice to say, it freaked them the fuck out. They were like, what the hell are we going to do with this? And again, like, and I don't remember, I didn't have a part in the video. John and Brian conceptualized it. And the record company paid for it. And so the label dropped the band 6 weeks after the album came out.
Wow.
Without really any reason. Spring cleaning. Now, the other layer to this is that a Rolling Stone writer did a little small article about the band and mentions that Brian is HIV positive, which was not really public knowledge at that time. And this writer, gay writer, figured, oh, well, everybody knows, right? And it's like, no. And you didn't let Brian know that you were going to mention that? Because it was a big deal. This was 1996, okay? Gay men are still dropping dead from HIV and AIDS. And it was just before the cocktails. I mean, gay men were dying left and right. So, okay, what does Atlantic Records think? here's this video with homoeroticism in it, and we have a lead singer who's HIV positive. So they dropped the band, and they were like, well, your record didn't really sell, and we have to clean house. I mean, it was 6 weeks after they put it out and didn't promote it at all. So I tell the story just because, I think about how brave Brian Grillo is and was, how groundbreaking in 1996 to even attempt to make a video like that. And just say, like, this is who I am, this is the band, this is our vision, take it or leave it. And yeah, Atlantic Records left it, and it, at that point the band basically broke up after that. But I'll tell you this, MTV was a fan of the band. We made a video for the other song I told you about for like $10,000 for You Look Like a Movie Star, Honey. And they played that on 120 minutes like 3 times just because they liked it. So they got the Sinnerman video. Atlantic Records was not trying to get it played on MTV. They played that 2 or 3 times on 120 minutes. So, and it's like a great song. Like, it could still be a hit today. It's just a great version of Sinnerman. It's a rockin' version of Sinnerman. But that was just soul crushing what happened, because we worked so hard to just get any label to want to work with us and believe in the band. And I was kind of like the 5th member of the band. I really was. So yeah, so I had 2 experiences being a band manager. The one big band that was still signed were all drug addicts, and the other band, basically got shit on because their lead singer was gay and HIV positive, and they had no spine. And I'm just going to leave this thought. Imagine if Atlantic had just stuck with them, right, and tried to work the song, and if they had said, "Hey, can we do another cut of the video and maybe tame it?" I'm sure we would have. It wasn't like, no, it's our way or the highway. But if they had just stuck with it and got it on the radio and maybe made even a small minor hit out of it, they would have looked like groundbreaking heroes, because they were a major label, first openly gay man, rock and roll guy, signed to a major label who had a hit record. You know what I'm saying? Like, here they created this gay division, and they're not even willing to stick with it or put any kind of muscle or belief into it, I guess you could say. Because Brian, is a rock star. He was like kind of like a Iggy Pop, Henry Rollins kind of vibe. Really fucking hot guy, really masculine guy, really like badass guy, who no one had seen a version of a gay guy like that, let alone in a rock band. I mean, Freddie Mercury? No. Freddie Mercury was not out. You know what I'm saying? Like, it just had never been done before. And maybe, Brian was probably way ahead of his time. Excuse me.
Well, it seems like you've made your career being kind of a groundbreaker, gate crasher kind of guy, working on the fringe. And and after all these experiences with Warner Brothers and with Extra Fancy, you then went on to create something that is iconic. Dragstrip 66. I see this buxom bimbo standing behind you, which obviously is from your Dragstrip 66 days. I see your T-shirt with the Dragstrip 66 logo on it. Why don't you talk a little bit about how Dragstrip 66 came to be?
Okay. So Mr. Dan and I had done a few clubs, and like kind of divey bars, and again, me DJing, him hosting. Excuse me. And they never really took off. Like we kind of created a nice little core of friends and people that came, but we just never really got a crowd. And we did a club called Mystery Date, which was a weekly themed club. The themes were all classic TV. So like Dick Van Dyke, Bewitched, the Flintstones. And we would create all this ephemera, like Xeroxes. We would hand watercolor all these things. And it was a huge production. And again, nobody was really showing up. And so we said like, well, maybe we should think about something monthly. Maybe it'll be less work. It'll give us more time to do it. And Dan said, why don't we try to come up with something where it's themed, like we did with Mystery Date, but it's monthly, and the crowd dresses in drag for the theme, or just in drag in general. And we made a pact because we were so disillusioned. We didn't think that LA got us, like they got me in Boston, but it didn't feel like they got me or him in LA. And we said, let's try this. And if we'll do it for 6 months, we'll do 6 of them. And if we don't feel like, we're getting a turnout, we're just going to end. We're done, And so we launched it on January 9th, 1993. I guess that would be 11 days before Bill Clinton would get sworn in. So here we are creating this nightclub after 12 years of right-wing bullshit with Reagan and Bush and AIDS basically, just destroying the gay community, eviscerating the gay community. And we had a pretty good turnout. We had about 300 people, and it was really fun. And so the people that own the venue said, do you want to come back? And we're like, yes, okay, sure. So the second one was the Karen Black Valentine Ball. Karen Black, Karen Valentine, if you know room 222.
Yep.
And Karen Black shows up with her gay hairdresser, which was fun. The third one, we did Night of a Zillion Jans, as in Jan Brady. And boy, that was the one. It was 700 people. And everyone dressed up. Like, it took a while for people to understand, no, you come in drag. Like, yes, you're going to see a drag show and there's people on stage, but you come in drag. Like, we want you to take this theme and dress up for it. And by the third one, boy, did they really got it. And I'm just going to be brutally honest with you. After that third one, it was packed for 11 straight years in that same venue. And completely word of mouth. No, we didn't advertise the club. It was just friend told a friend told a friend, and it just snowballed. And it was just amazing. It was, Art, it's like when you DJ or you do a club, every once in a while, there's lightning in a bottle, you may not plan on it, but it's just like the right idea at the right time with the right people. And I always say, you can be the best DJ or have the best idea, but if you don't have the audience or the right people to come, then your idea doesn't really mean anything. It's that synergy that it takes both. And for whatever reason, it just, people just responded to it. But the thing about Dragstrip was, I talked about how I didn't really fit in, to the mainstream gay world. Same thing with Mr. Dan, Gina Lotriman. That was his drag name, Gina Lotriman. And so we look at each other and we're like, well, where would we want to go? Like, what music would we want to hear? What crowd would we want to hang out with? And what vibe do we want? It didn't exist. So we kind of had to create it. And again, like, we weren't sure, like, are there enough people out there? Are there enough other misfits out there that can populate this club and sustain it more than a few times. And there was. And the amazing thing was, because of the drag, it added all these layers to why a club experience can be like amazing and beautiful. And what I mean by that is, one, we allowed people to be their authentic selves. You know, people that maybe worked, 9-to-5 jobs, maybe they weren't out yet. Maybe they weren't accepted by their family. Maybe they were kicked out by their family. Maybe they felt alone or like a misfit. And we just made it feel that we wanted everyone to feel welcome. And there was no hierarchy, sort of like who was cooler or more wanted or sought out. It felt like this level playing field, that when you came, if you in drag or not, because not everybody was in drag, it was only maybe about 30-40% at any given time. The rest of it was just, hot guys, to be honest with you. But it gave people an opportunity to shed inhibitions, create a fantasy, have a masquerade. And when you think about Halloween, right? Why is Halloween so fun? We get to be something else even for a few hours. And no one knows it's us. No one's going to judge us because it's Halloween. We can be crazy and wild, right? Not just drag, anything. And so we had Halloween every month, basically. So there was that. And the other part about the drag was that it created a way for people to talk to total strangers, because you could, if you're in drag, drag needs an audience to make it seem fabulous, if that makes sense. Like, we had an outdoor patio, and so like the queens would go outside, and the guys that weren't in drag would be like, "Oh, you look fabulous." Instant conversation. Or, "Oh my God, those shoes, how do you walk in them?" Instant conversation. "Oh, that wig is a mess." Instant conversation. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So it was like an incredible way for like ice breaking and socializing. And I will tell you that, there are people that are like best friends now, right? Who met as total strangers at Dragstrip. And there's couples. I can name 5 couples that met there, are still together. I think all 5 of them got married. So like that, that's the kind of stuff. Like, and again, when you're in the middle of it, when you're doing it, all these kind of like sociological things, you're not really thinking about them. You're just doing it. I mean, you know that you want to put out a good vibe, and you know what the music's going to be, the show is going to be, but in terms of like how it's going to connect, how it's going to connect people to each other, you don't know that. Now we know. And I think the other huge layer, again, going back to HIV, because it really was such a big part of our lives. 3 years into Dragstrip, the protease inhibitors happened, the cocktail. And, and I remember I had a couple of friends that had, they had the 6-month window, like they were told, okay, your prognosis is not good. You should really plan to die. And they started on the cocktail, and everything changed. Everything turned around. And, multiply that by the hundreds. And so here's a group, mainly gay men, who have been thinking mentally, I'm going to be dead a year from now, who now aren't, whose death sentence got lifted. And we just provided, it was like, somebody made a good point the other day. They said, living through that, our daytime was hell. Trying to like navigate the world and then be sick or watch your friend get sick. It was hell. And Dragstrip was our heaven, you know, just for a few hours once a month. It was like this, just like release of anxiety and negativity, and it was positivity. You know, it was black versus white, you know, or light versus dark. Um, and I just remember too, like there was a couple of younger patrons that we had who told our door girl Sugar that, you know, they were going to kill themselves. Their parents kicked them out, and they never felt really they had anybody to talk to or be with. uh, and you know, they found Dragstrip, and it made them not want to kill themselves. So I mean, again, at the time, that's pretty heavy, and I didn't. I mean, I took it to heart, and I knew that that was pretty special. And you know, if I died that night, I would die knowing that I made somebody's life just a little bit better, just by accepting them. You know, just accepting everybody was a big part of why everybody loved the club. Like I said, everybody was welcome. Everybody could be exactly who they wanted to be, and nobody judged them. You know, there was no, you're not buff enough, you're not young enough, you're not pretty enough. No, there was, it just didn't happen. You know, and I know that sounds almost, what's the word, idyllic, or I don't know. There's another word that I can't think of. That you know, it's everything you want when you go out. When you go out, you want to feel wanted and special, and not judged. And I'm sorry, the gay community can be the opposite of all those things, especially in the mask for mask world. And I remember when we started, you know, the West Hollywood crowd, because we were in Silver Lake. And if you now, this is a little history lesson. Silver Lake is the east side of Hollywood. West Hollywood is obviously west. West Hollywood was like Boys Town, the established gay neighborhood. Silver Lake was the queer neighborhood. It was like the artist, punk rock, queer kind of neighborhood, very ethnically mixed, you know, very Latino, and not very safe in a few places. And we had to be in Silver Lake. Like, we could not do this club in West Hollywood or even Hollywood. We knew that we had to be kind of off the beaten path, and we did it on purpose. And I think that was a big part of why it was a special thing. You know, people felt like it was theirs. You know, it's like if you have a favorite band that you discover early, and then you hold it in your heart, and you're like, this is my band. Like, I was there from the beginning, and you know, this is my tribe and my band. It was like that with the club.
Right. It sounds a lot like, you know, at that time frame in the gay world, there had already been a lull, you know, as you mentioned, with the rise of HIV and people dying from AIDS. In the late '80s, the club scene was starting to dwindle out in a lot of places, and things were changing everywhere. And it sounds a lot like Dragstrip was almost the West Coast equivalent of the club kid scene in New York, which came on around the same time and kind of had that laissez-faire, everyone's welcome, let your freak shine, be who you are, and we love you, come have a good time and add to our vibe.
Yeah. The club kids, I think, were the club kids late 80s or 90s?
Yeah, they started in the late 80s, and they went until like 97 when Elig went to
Right. So. Okay, yeah. And you know what? Here's another little layer. You're right. That's exactly right. And again, fantasy masquerade, not giving a shit, like just being like, I'm going to dress so fucked up, I'm going to shock you, and you know, here's the funny thing. So we had just like insanely hot guys, okay, at Dragstrip, and again, the Silver Lake scene was sort of the alternative kind of like grunge, you know, non-mainstream gay crowd, and just hot guys. And guys were getting laid left and right because they didn't go there to get laid. They went there to have fun. And when you try too hard, like if you're like, oh my God, I'm so fucking horny, I gotta go out and I gotta find some dick, or I gotta have some sex. Well, you're probably not gonna find it because you
Too
like
desperate.
like desperation or that, you can sense it. And at Dragstrip, and again, it was so crowded, like you couldn't help but like pinch somebody. It was like wall to wall people. So like you're waiting in line for a drink, and some guy standing in front of you with like a nice ass, and you can't move. You have like a square foot of space. So like I talked about how drag like kind of broke the ice. Well, there was stuff going on in the club, on the dance floor, in the kitchen, backstage area, that it could never happen now, and it wasn't hurting anybody, it wasn't like, oh my God, there's sex shows, but it was just so free that people were like, let's just get off right here. And again, it was so crowded, you kind of couldn't see. Somebody was like, oh wow, I think somebody's getting a blowjob right there by the stage. Is that what that is? Okay, yeah, cool. And what was I was going to say about, so Silver Lake and West Hollywood, a lot of the West Hollywood guys wouldn't come because they don't do drag. They're masculine. And not even just West Hollywood. There was leather bars in Silver Lake. There was like an older leather crowd that thought it was all drag, and that's not their thing. They're masculine. Meanwhile, leather is drag. Okay.
Right.
You didn't wake up wearing a leather harness and chaps. Okay. Thank you. So it took that crowd so it took like 4 or 5 years. And the word kept going to these people, like, you really need to go. Like, A, it's just fucking fun. And B, the hottest guys in LA are there. And C, you can have sex with them. Or you can meet them, and you'll find somebody hot to fool around with. And I hate to say it, but, they're at that time, this is way pre RuPaul's Drag Race and drag queens hosting at leather bars now. Hello? There was a line. It was like if you were a leather queen or a leather guy, and then you did drag, what's the expression? The twain shall not meet. Like there was a line in the sand, and we kind of shoved that shit out the window. It's like, just because I dress and drag once a month does not mean I want to be a woman. Doesn't make me any less masculine. And if you are so insecure with that, that's your problem. It's not mine. So I hope that we kind of I think we broke down a lot of that stupid like, well, you're in this camp, I'm in that camp, and well, I guess we can't really hang out with each other because we're not in the same camp.
It sounds like it was quite an experience there. And from what I've seen, I've seen a ton of pictures from Dragstrip. I've seen video clips, all kinds of stuff. And I noticed that not only did you, set up in kind of off the beaten path in a less glamorous neighborhood and have a completely different concept for your club, but you
Right.
still managed to attract some Hollywood types, some celebrities, some big names showing up there because they wanted to have fun. They didn't always want to be on a pedestal and have people snapping pictures and being fans. They wanted to go out and have fun.
I'm so glad you said that. And again, we never advertised. It was all word of mouth. I mean, we would get an LA Weekly listing once in a while. The LA Times I think at the 5th anniversary, they did a little article, but like we did not seek out press. Like we needed less people. I know that sounds ridiculous. We had a point for like 3 years where we raised the price to $20 because we wanted less people to come. And one thing I just want to mention is that we If you dressed in drag, you got in for $5, always, from the very first one, and you would wait. You would get in faster. So it was sort of the opposite of Studio 54. It was kind of like, it's not velvet rope. It's that you are participating. Like, even if you're a mess, our slogan was dress a mess, get in for less. And so we lost a shit ton of money. Like, we could have said, hey, we're the hottest club in LA. Everybody pays 20, fuck you. No, we didn't do that. Because we didn't create this club to get rich. We created the club to create a community. But getting back to the celebrities, the sixth one we did, friend of ours, Kitten Caboodle, drag name, guy named Tom, was a set decorator. He worked on Roseanne's show, and it's like 10 o'clock, and this crowd walks up. It was Dragstrip 666, so it was a Halloween theme. And you can't tell who anybody is, and there's this kind of Zaftig woman. She's got a feather mask on her face, but her décolletage is showing, and there's like a rose I think it's on her left side, and we're like, holy shit, that's Roseanne. And later, we saw Tom, and I said, did you walk in with Roseanne? He's like, yeah, I set decorate her show. So that was like our first kind of big celebrity. Well, actually, Karen Black was before that. Karen Black was the second one ever. And we had everybody from, Pedro Almodovar to Marilyn Manson to Anna Nicole Smith and Ian McKellen. And I never saw half these people because I was always in the DJ booth. But you're exactly right. We had no VIP area. The only places they could kind of go to maybe escape a little bit, the kitchen was the backstage. This was a restaurant nightclub. So we had no actual green room or dressing room. It was the fucking kitchen, okay? You come in, you bring in your own mirrors and your own lighting. Next to you is a freaking gas stove and a sink, right? And Drew Barrymore, another one. Excuse me. What they loved, well, here's the other thing. If they dressed in drag, no one's going to know it's them, for one. But most of them didn't. Most of them, just came day clothes or whatever, club clothes. But our crowd didn't hound them. And again, this is all pre-social media.
Right.
So they didn't have to worry about, oh, shit. And especially if they were closeted, because Anderson Cooper came before he came out. He was there. They didn't have to worry about fucking cameras snapping their every move and it being shared on social media within 2 hours or 15 minutes or whatever. And the other thing is that, you want to hear something funny? In the height of this, right, where it's just packed, like 5 or 6 years in, I would always say to Mr. Dan, like, I wonder when Madonna's going to show up, right? Because, Madonna knows about all the clubs, and I figured it would just be a matter of time. And I kept saying that we both would say this, like, I hope she doesn't show up, because if she does, that's going to get out, like that.
Right.
That's going to be like, did you hear that Madonna was at Dragstrip? And what that would cause is a whole bunch of stupid looky-loos and tourists that we don't want, right? And when I say that, it's not a judgment. However, we didn't want the most people. We wanted the right people. And if you're only coming because you think you might run into Madonna, you know what I mean? Then you're not there for the right reason. We don't want you there for that. We want you to come so that you can add something to the energy and to the vibe and be a part of creating this night with everyone else.
Exactly. And I can totally see Madonna showing up there, because I know some of the clubs that I've already talked to people about in New York that she's shown up, like the Tunnel. I mean, a little grungy off the beaten path, not glamorous club, but those are the kind of places that she could go. And,
Right. That's right. Yeah, she could. Yeah, those were places where, yes, they would probably. Some people, I'm not saying nobody would approach celebrities at Dragstrip. I'm sure, I'm
yeah,
sure there was moments of like, oh, I'm a really big fan. That's kind of inevitable. But the sort of like, pawing and
yeah,
like invading space, it just didn't happen. It was like a crowd didn't give a shit. You know, it was more like, oh my God, I remember somebody saying this to me after it happened. Like, I couldn't believe it. Like, it was so crowded, and I'm on the dance floor, and I turned around and I was dancing next to Ian McKellen. Fucking Ian McKellen, Sir Ian McKellen. And no one said, and again, I didn't find out till like the next day that he was even there. And we don't have any photos. We have some photos of the celebrities, but mostly we don't because we just didn't know. Like, we didn't know they were there until the
right.
next day.
And you mentioned Pedro Almodovar, and
Uh-huh.
I know a lot of people don't know who he is, but I've loved his movies for decades.
Oh yeah.
Before
Me
he
too.
became Americanized, the later
Yeah.
movies, he's gotten a little bit too much into the American commercial thing. But as soon as you said his name, I had a vision in my head of women on the verge of a nervous breakdown, the costuming, the way they acted, the extravagance of
Yeah.
the characters. I could see him coming in with a couple of those women and strolling through the bar like he was just, there, like he was in his element.
Well,
So,
the reason he came, there was the twins. They called themselves the Wonder Twins, and they were twins, gay twins, and they were club kids. They had the huge shoes, but everything they wore matched, and they were Mexican or Spanish, I guess. Spanish was their first language, and so when they went to Spain, obviously they were so fabulous. They met Pedro immediately. So that's how he found out about it when he came to LA. Of course, he looked them up because they lived in LA, and so that's how he knew about it. But yeah, and the thing, mentioning that, just to mention about the themes that we did, they were all kind of like pop culture mashups. We did things like thoroughly modern military, turban renewal, Florence of Arabia, stupid puns like, but it all taken from pop culture. Florence of Arabia, like how many I Dream of Jeannie showed up? Oh, about 50. But we made it broad enough so that like you could do an interpretation. Like if the theme was like really specific, it would be like, how the fuck do you do that? Like if you said, Mary Tyler Moore, season 7, like what's that?
right.
So we had to come up with, you could do, cowboy or, there's only so many. And believe me, we recycled a whole bunch of them. It doesn't matter. It's like, I think we did feathers and leather like 3 times. No one cared. Because maybe the person coming to the second one didn't come to the first one. Plus, it's so easy. It's like everybody can find some leather or some feathers. So that was part of the fun. And many people have said so when you came, you got a flyer as you left. So you would know 30 days, the next theme. And so many people, they would plan their month around it, and they would spend the month saying, okay, like I have 30 days. How am I going to come up with a James Bond look or, a caveman look or an airline stewardess look, like whatever. And people did. And some of the looks were like, they'd blow my mind. And one other thing that I found out about a lot of who the crowd was, a lot of the creative community, the creative movie and TV community, like my friend who was a set decorator for Roseanne, a lot of these people, that's what they did during the day. Like they created sets or they were costumers. So like we gave them this platform every month to be like, oh, all right, I'm going to show these bitches off. Like I have professional ways to make my drag. Like wait till they see me. So there was a lot of that too. the other layer too that I think just made the club, we did something called the promenade. So we would have a show, we would have a drag show. That I have to get into that in a second, what set us apart with that. But there'd be like 2 or 3 songs, and then we'd have the promenade. Well, what that meant was if you were in drag, theme or not, just any drag, you could walk on stage for 10 or 15 seconds, have your spotlight, have your adoration from the crowd, or get completely red, like red to filth. Like, oh my God, what a mess, you're trash, you look like shit. Get off the stage, drunk bitch. People lived for that. They wanted to be red. Like, it was more of a badge of honor to be like insulted in red. But then for others, it was like, again, this costume that they spent a month on and they looked just fucking amazing. And it wasn't a contest. It wasn't like, well, we did sometimes have a contest because we might have like, tickets to see the B-52s. Okay, who dressed in the theme or really wows the crowd? You win the tickets. But it really wasn't. It was like an exhibition. Here's your 15 seconds. Go work it. Go work the runway. Go soak up the love or the shade. Get off the stage, and it's the next queen's chance, And people really love that. And again, the separation between us, who did the club, and them, who came to the club, was completely blurred. Like, the crowd was the show. Yes, we gave them a show, but the crowd was the show, which was unique. Like, I don't think that, like, maybe Studio 54, that kind of happened. But in terms of like a lot of people doing it, I think we were one of the first, if not one of the only, at least at the time, saying that, no, you're the star. You coming to the club, you're the star of the show. Like, you're going to get the attention and the praise and the love and the shade. That's your responsibility to be that.
And again, I see the same parallel with the club kids, because that's the way it was in that scene in New York. A lot of the people that were just nobodies on the street, they would look forward to that night going out, being ridiculous, extravagant, whatever. Shocking, and be the light, be the one that everybody talked about, or getting attention for that 15 minutes of fame or whatever it was.
Right. So, and it's validation, and again, if you're a creative person and you don't have an outlet, right? And maybe you have a boring 9-to-5 job. It's like, there's very few things that allow you to like do the thing you love or let your creativity come out. And any place, whether it's like a club kid or our club or Wigstock or Tranny Shack in San Francisco, these places, again, gave these creative people this like platform and of just a few hours to be as wild and funny or silly or stupid or ugly or pretty as they wanted to be.
Absolutely. And you started this almost, I pictured in my head as being like a pop-up boutique. We don't own a bar. We don't have bartenders on staff. We have an idea. We want to throw a party. We're going to try this. So it was like a pop-up boutique that suddenly turned into like a flagship store. And for 20 years, you kept that going with that same kind of energy and excitement and interaction, which is really quite a success story in and of itself.
Well, I think just one thing that I think is important, again, when I talked about how if you discover something at the very beginning and you sort of feel precious about it, that it's yours, inevitably what happens, especially with clubs, well, just one thing about what you said about a pop-up, the difference between LA and a lot of cities is that if you have an idea, that's what you do. You're a promoter or a DJ with a name and a concept, and then you go find the vessel, which is the venue, and you might pick once a week or once a month, and then you have to do everything. Like you have to do the decorations, the promotion, the flyers, all that, and it's up to you to get the crowd. Whereas it's different than if you're a nightclub that came up with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of the best clubs in LA were the sort of pop up. The concept was brought to a venue, and that's where the event happened. I'm just going to say one thing because I have not really mentioned this. So Mr. Dan, Gina Lotriman, my best friend, we co-created the club. He kind of did everything. I mean, I'm not saying that I didn't, but in terms of like decorating and coming up with the songs, booking the queens, rehearsing with the queens, maybe recording some vocal tracks with them so it was a little sweeter, like all this work. He did it. I did the DJing, but I did more of the promotion and the PR kind of thing. I was the one that this was before social media, but I was the guy that would, print the flyers and show up and hand them out to people and do that. So, but Mr. Dan is just the most talented person I think I've ever met. He's funny. The crowd loves him because he's like Den Mother, but he can also like shade you, but it's never evil. Like it's playful, and the crowd loves that. And he's just an incredible person, and just such a talented guy. So I just want to make sure that I don't want people to feel like this is just a Paul V show. Like it, Mr. Dan. Dragstrip wouldn't exist. Dragstrip really is me and Mr. Dan. And if you take one of us out of the equation, I would never call a club Dragstrip 66 if Dan didn't participate, and he would never do it if I didn't. It really was a 50-50, this is our baby kind of thing.
Proud parents. Well,
Yep.
I'm glad you did it, and I'm glad that you've got all this video footage that hopefully we can get funded and produced, and people can see the frockumentary, because I think that would be really eye-opening to a lot of people, especially because it's taking an underground environment. It's not taking a Broadway show and showing it
Right.
to you on video. It's
Right.
taking what was happening in the nitty-gritty, kind of off the beaten path of West Hollywood or whatever, and bringing it back to life. And I think that's a big important part of the whole project that I'm doing. When we were talking about your book, you have a book out that is called Born This Way.
Yes. Born This Way. Real stories of growing up gay. And see that little boy in the plaid jumpsuit on the cover?
That's a boy?
Yeah, right here. Wait, this guy. How dare you?
That must be you.
No, it's not me.
Oh.
Although we kind of look alike as kids, but so okay, I'm just gonna do this quickly, okay? This is how long ago it was. On MySpace, he was a friend. His name is Dennis. He changed his profile picture to that. And I saw it, and I looked at it, and I said, that's a gay baby. That's a gay boy right there. And I said, wouldn't it be, I had a light bulb. I said, wouldn't it be cool if there was a place where gay adults could find a childhood photo and kind of share their growing up story with the world? That would be a great idea for a book. And I locked it up in here and didn't do anything with it. And in the fall of 2010, if you remember, I don't know if you do, but there was like 5 gay suicides in a row. It was like every 3 weeks, some other kid got bullied and killed themselves. And it's what inspired It Gets Better. And then I saw Lady Gaga on the MTV Movie Awards or whatever it was. And she said, oh, my next single is going to be called Born This Way. And so then a friend of mine said, well, I told him about the idea. And he goes, well, why don't you just do a blog? Just get it online. And I thought, I really want to, because I feel like gay kids now, again, they need to know that they're not alone. They need to see that there was other people that came up before them that were kids just like them, and they made it out. They made it through. And they're going to tell you, who they were and what they were as kids. And so I launched it in January 2011, and it just exploded. like, and it was just a Google blog. But then like the first few photos, like the first maybe 20 or 30 photos were A, just my Facebook friends, but B, people thought the idea was you had to find the gayest photo, like the most fabulous photo, and that was the concept. That really wasn't. I mean, that was part of it, and that's really fun too. Like, it's okay to laugh at it. Like, we can look back at our gay baby selves if we were flamboyant or whatever and laugh at it. But eventually, like, the stories got very deep, and not all of them had good endings, and some of them were hard to read and kind of warts and all. And it became clear that like this was this platform, and people just responded to it. It exploded. I don't know how to explain it. It went from like 1,000 views to 4 million views in like 6 months, and just promoting it on social media. But then it got written about by like Dan Savage and that little snowball. So publishers, of course, smelled money in the water, and they said, "Oh, this would be a great idea for a book." And I'm like, "Hey, I thought I heard that somewhere." But you know what? It's funny. 8 publishers turned it down, and only this really small publisher in Philly said, "Okay, we'll do it." And I'm going to brag a little bit. With no promotion, they've done 2 printings of it. It's basically its first run sold out before it was released, and it still sells. I mean, I got like a $32 royalty check last month after 10 years, which is kind of like they did no promotion for this. They just didn't. And it's just word of mouth. I love word of mouth. I think something that's word of mouth is purer than if you're reading about something, 50 million times. You almost feel like, well, everybody's trying to tell me this is so great. I don't believe you anymore. You know what I mean?
Right.
Anyway, so I'm very proud of it because, again, it's really kind of tied to what you're doing because our stories don't get told. People don't understand what it's like to grow up gay, closeted, scared, bullied, afraid, think you're the only one. And suddenly, like, millions or thousands of people are like, "Oh, wow, I was just like that. That was me." Or that's very similar to my story. So I don't know. It was just a good idea. It was a fun idea. And I said, let's go for it. And I did it. And it's bornthiswayblog.com. And I need stories. Like it's really slowed down. Like people are not sending them in. So if you can hear me and you want to tell your growing up gay story, please go to bornthiswayblog.com, find a childhood photo, and we'll feature you.
All right, then. Well, we'll have to do that. And again, I want to thank you for telling us about your experiences with Dragstrip 66 and your LA life, and of course the book and the blog. And I hope that soon you get all the funding you need for the frockumentary, and we can be watching that too.
Well, if people want to donate, they can. If they go to ds66thefrockumentary.com, there's a film independent link, and it's actually tax deductible. So if you know any like wealthy people that want to invest, or if you want to give us $10, we'll be happy.
Well, thank you. And thank you for taking the time to tell us your stories.
Thank you, Art. I hope I feel like I have talked way too long, but I appreciate the platform and I appreciate what you do. So thank you.
Thank you. That concludes another episode of the GayBarchives Show. For more information about this episode or to find more episodes, visit GayBarchives.com.